All right, we have got the usual suspects for tanky therapy: Sina, Alex, Joe. Um, hey guys, it's been a long time since we got.
I
I mean, you guys got together without me, but it's been a long time since I've been to group. I think that's what we call it, right? Group. Um, and it's just, uh, it's been. I think since the last time I was here, I don't think I was here since the pager attack. Like I think we
oh,
had our last session before the pager attack. So the last time we talked, Nasrallah was alive, Sinwar was alive, all of Hezbollah's command was alive. Israel hadn't invaded Lebanon. Israel hadn't attacked Iran yet. North Gaza genocide was way less intense. And it's just like, just just saying all of that, it's unbelievable. But the thing that I was thinking about talking to you guys about today was denial, because I was thinking about like Israeli denial and how, I go on like Alon Mizrahi or Ori Goldberg. There's a couple of Israeli Twitter personalities that I follow. And Ori Goldberg is so depressed. He's just so depressed and he's just like, I don't understand the Israeli mentality right now, and they're triumphalist, and every death and every genocidal act they're celebrating, and he doesn't identify with that anymore. Alon Mizrahi leaves, but he's sort of like tries to be the Israeli whisperer to the non-Israeli world, so he's trying to explain the mentality. But like the denial, like I was trying to talk to somebody about the Israeli attack on Iran from 2 days ago, and a lot of people believe that it's all theatrical. So they were like, well, Israel wasn't really trying to hit Iran, because if they were, they would have hit Iran. And Iran wasn't really trying to hit Israel. So they're just doing theater. And I do not believe this is theater whatsoever. I believe Israel, as you guys know, like was seriously trying to hurt Iran, and it didn't go the way they thought. But it's kind of like, if you were watching the Western media, you think that Iran's attack was theater, and then you think that Israel's attack was they did whatever they wanted. I was thinking about denial, um, in terms of our society, like in terms of Canada, and like most of the things Israel does are not defended in Canada. They don't defend what's going on in North Gaza. They just don't, they just make sure people don't know. And they don't really defend most of what Israel does in Lebanon. They don't defend um like the whole story of the gold, like the gold under the hospital. And it's like, first of all, why do you want to bomb gold? And like, since when do you bomb gold? And then like you're trying to bomb gold that doesn't exist. And then there's another layer of like bombing a hospital to bomb gold that doesn't exist. But like, since when was gold a pretext to bomb someplace? And I never saw a Canadian defending that gold story. I saw that gold story come and the gold story go. But like, Canadians don't talk, like the Canadian elite that supports Israel, they don't talk about most of the stuff. They just pretend it's not happening. And that's like what I see in most of society, is like there's very particular times that you're allowed to talk about it. There's very specific ways that you're allowed to talk about it. And the rest of the time, it's just denial. And Morandi, Mohammed Morandi, I'm sure people who are listening know who Mohammed Morandi is. He's a professor in Iran, and I think he spent a lot of time in the States because of his accent, and like he's very knowledgeable about the States and very fluent in reading Western politics. But he said something that I thought was really interesting on one of the many interviews he was on. He said, if the Western media had focused on North Gaza for 3 days, they wouldn't have been able to do what they're doing. And I'm like a very, as a self-hating media person, you know, I'm very disdainful of the material power of media work. I'm always self-deprecating. Joe is always telling me not to be. But but that made sense to me, like the denial is such an important part. It's not just these repulsive characters that come to gloat about every atrocity or come into all of our feeds in the comment section that I'm always frantically blocking, and Sina makes fun of me for blocking everybody with anything negative to say.
Like a
It's not
true tanky.
as a true
Only
tanky. We
praise.
we don't believe in free
Praise is
speech.
only
Praise
accepted.
is acceptable. Very, very carefully phrased criticism. If it's very, very, very affectionately
Hey
phrased.
man, if libs get to live in their own echo chamber, we get to live in our own echo
Yeah,
chamber.
I have, while I have this button, I will use this button. John Elmer once said, "Man, your comment section is fantastic." And I said, "Yeah, I did it with only one button." Yeah, I did the whole thing with one button. So, um, so denial is the thing. And I think that, when you think about mental health or therapy or like getting together as a group of friends to try to stay sane, like everything we're doing is to try to break out of denial. And when you're trying to get out of denial, it hurts. Like, I've never felt, especially since like the pager attack, the assassination of all those leaders, Nasrallah especially was rough for me. Like, it was probably the worst day of the whole war so far for me when I like realized for sure that Nasrallah was dead. But like the truth hurts. Like that cliche is like I felt that so true. Like I felt that so much this past month, which was like the truth that Nasrallah's dead. Like we're never gonna have another speech again. Like the childish way that I used to wait for those speeches, and how excited I was, and I would stop everything that I was doing. And like we all would do that on the chat too, right? We'd be like, guys, 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 he's about to speak, he's about to speak. And yeah, so I guess that's what's on my mind. It's like that I know that moving forward, there's still like so many, the way we intervene in the media, we still have to cope with this denial. We still have to work around it. Um, last thought was I listened to the Ta-Nehisi Coates Trevor Noah interview I'm almost at the very end. And it was just that was another example where it was like what Ta-Nehisi Coates is saying and doing now is pretty good. But it's like he doesn't have the facts about October 7th. And he made this analogy to Nat Turner, and he said Nat Turner committed atrocities in his anti-slave rebellion. And what that made me think, you guys, was maybe Nat Turner didn't commit atrocity. Like, given the lies about October 7th, I started to think maybe the story of the Nat Turner rebellion was probably rewritten by the slavers, and he may not have committed any atrocities either. It's like making me think that so much of the history that we've been taught might be wrong. Um, because we're watching it unfold in real time, and we watched how ready they were with the lies and how structured the conversation is around denial of certain of the worst things that we just aren't allowed to acknowledge. So that's what I've been thinking about.
Haiti hasn't been able to shake all the shit they said about it
Yeah.
since 1791. I mean, that's for me, that's the script. Like I keep,
Yeah.
and I've mentioned it before, right? I keep thinking about the Haitian Revolution in relation to October 7th and how people have talked about it back then, who got to write about it, who got to say stuff about it, and whose record gets accepted as a legit primary source for historians who then want to talk about the Haitian, write about the Haitian Revolution, and who doesn't, right? So it's crazy to see this happen two more than 200 years later. But that's for me, that's like the one of the foundational moments where we see something similar happen. I think I tweeted like a last year at some point. I said something like, "I'm really glad the Twitter wasn't around during the Haitian Revolution." I think I mentioned it on the show, and I really feel that because that's we can imagine the takes. we can imagine the type of immediate empathy that would have been within Western countries, within Canada, within the United States, the immediate empathy that would have been immediately on demand for the slave owners. And anything that they would have said about what they suffered at the hands of these insurrectionaries turned revolutionaries would have been believed, right? I mean, one of the oldest tropes about the Haitian Revolution that it'll still come up in like more popular renditions of it is that during the initial insurrection, that the insurrectionists were beheaded a white child and put the head on a pike, and that was their battle standard. Where does that story come from? It comes from one of these early like British or French, I don't know, one of these colonizer narratives that has remained, right? And it gets reproduced. And this is what's going to happen with October 7th, except for all the reasons that Sina has talked about, right? In terms of the access to information, the speed of it, the role of media. Like this stuff, we've seen what's happened to this narrative. It's become completely cemented, whereas people do serious research about what actually happened that day, that it represented a form of a raid, but that the magnitude of power between the people who are actually doing research about what actually happened that day versus a presidential candidate in the United States during every single one of their speeches, including in Michigan, repeating the same bullshit. I mean, so it's crazy. Yeah, no, I keep thinking about that.
The other thing, when they like hanged bunches of slaves at a time, or burned them, or chopped them up and threw them into the sea, all of which the French did, we would have had to have French people tweeting at us and being like, how's it hanging? You know, how's it hanging, slave lovers?
They gassed Haitians in the holds of ships.
Yeah.
And then dumped them over. Yeah, that would have been the response. They used war dogs from Cuba to like unleash on them, and they would have been the same thing.
They're making pager jokes. Like, pager jokes are just cool now, right? Like, this absolute atrocity is like something everybody in the American ruling class just thinks is hilarious and just jokes about. Where's your pager, Hardy Har?
And Zionists attribute it to Jewish ingenuity. Like, they ascribe their culture to it, like an act of terrorism. Like the very thing that like reactionary fascists did here to Islam as an accusation, be like, oh, this act of terrorism is an act of your religion. Like Zionists proudly do to themselves. Like, it's strange. I don't think, I'm just going to jump in. I don't think we should get caught in atrocity accounting. I don't think that that leads nowhere good. And yeah, I mean, I think that yes. I mean, with that being said, the lies about October 7th, I think countering them is going to be like a generational struggle. I think ultimately the fact what this conversation that we're having is more about which facts get canonized into the official narratives of these, like transhistoric, like these incredibly historic events, right? These moments of historical rupture that then get, over time, their direct effects on the people involved and everybody who lived at the time they occurred, like they get, as the distance between, like temporal distance grows between the present and that event, like the lingering images. So this is where canonical, like, this is where canonicity matters, right? So the New York Times said the following thing about historical event X. CBC record of the so-called Oka crisis is always the framework, how we remember, because it's the most canonized image, right? And so like all of these historical events that to us are in the past and foreign and buried, just because of the nature of time and history and how we exist on this planet, like we only have textuality to like rely upon. And unfortunately, like imperialists have controlled for a while, up until very recently, have controlled that textuality to us. And so if anything, we're going to be the last generation of people who were raised on imperialist, on purely imperialist, canonical textuality. I would say that there has been a rupture, and I think the internet is the real time, the timeline, at least, where anyone who wants an alternate historical account can go and get it. I mean, yeah, it takes an incredible amount of work, amount of time. It's there, but it's there to be had. Now,
But that's where
what you
denial
said
is,
though,
that's where denial comes in, right? Because it's like
yeah, yes, yeah,
all these people that
it's
are
right
like
in front of
ask
you.
it really like it baffles me. Like I get that we all know and we study and we work and stuff, but like people come to me and they ask me stuff that I learned on the internet. I'm like, we're on the same internet, people. Like, what are you
Yeah.
asking me
But we're
for?
not, though. We're not. The internet has been refracted into multiple different kinds of internet, and that's like a separate discussion. But I think ultimately it's not denial, it's something else. It's a phrase Edward Said used in an interview once. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily his phrase, but it's stuck with me. But it's a conspiracy of silence. And that is it's an act. It's not denial. Like they see it, they know it. Most of them probably think it's horrible, but they agree with it. And it's the same. And it's not. I don't think it's unique in that in the annals of history. However, like I think you can. The history of imperialism has a whole bunch of important historical, canonical, intellectual figures, like right with it, just being like, "Well, I didn't know that happened. I don't know, like the famine. I didn't know that was happening." So like that's not unique. However, the intimacy, the speed at which we have documented evidence that yes, this is a massacre, yes, this is a crime, that's the disconnect. That's what's interesting. And
But
I
there's
think that
another
the silence
just
is
yeah.
that's what makes the conspiracy that much more powerful, is that they do it despite the evidence right in front of them.
Yeah.
Right? That's what makes it powerful.
And like Matt Miller or Patel or like all of these people that are spokespeople, they get up in front of the assembled press day after day and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I haven't seen. I'm afraid I don't know. We're gonna look into it and I don't know. And then that's like an acceptable answer week after week, day after day. Uh and nobody ever says, "Hey, that you know that thing you didn't know 2 weeks ago that you said you were gonna look into? Have you looked into it? Do you know now?"
But I
I
think
mean, the
Joe
U.S.
should
has done so
jump.
many more massacres than Israel has in its history. Why would it all of a sudden start being the massacre police?
No,
Like, you know what I mean?
but
Like,
the
it's not.
specific
But
role of
yes,
saying "I
yeah.
don't know" as like the person who's in charge of answering questions, and the
As the
specific
knower in chief.
yeah, the specific role of the knower in saying "I don't know," I think is a real. I haven't noticed that until this year. I didn't know how much like that's a new thing for me is just the spokespeople repeatedly saying "I don't know, I haven't seen, I don't know what's going on in that video you just showed me. I don't know what's going on in that thing."
But the
Um,
extra galling thing, though, is it's I don't know. And then we've asked the Israeli authorities for additional information, and we have an ongoing investigation to look on this thing. I mean, that's like the extra galling. Sorry, Joe, go ahead, jump in.
No, no, it's yeah, this is standard reply. We don't know. We're looking into it. We'll ask the Israelis. We'll get back to you. Yeah, that's standard. But honestly, I don't know why even people bother with those press conferences at this point. I'm tuning them out myself. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to say that the key aspect though is not just denial; it's denial of what the abomination of what Israel is, Nazi Israel is, but it's also the denial like of the heroism of Sinwar, of the heroism of the resistance, right? Like you can say, for instance, like Ryan Grimm said something like, "Oh, why aren't we praising these brave civil defense workers from in Palestine?" Obviously, yeah, of course, but why aren't? But the same can be said about the resistance fight, but we won't make that step. You know, there's this we'll praise doctors, and we should praise the Palestinian doctors and healthcare workers, civil defense, all those people obviously in heroic in Gaza, just surviving, just the people just surviving, but also the resistance fighters, like the people actually putting their lives on the line to fight this genocidal army. And that's where I find in terms of the propaganda, it's making sure that we demonize, making sure that we can criticize Israel, we can even condemn Israel, but we cannot praise the resistance. And the one thing after I saw Sinwar's last stand, throwing the stick, like I can't like. I just can't believe the Israelis are so disconnected from reality that they provided that propaganda gift to the resistance. That was unbelievable. How could you not see that? That was inspiring, man. That was beautiful. The man fought to his dying breath you know, and how can you not see the heroism there? And when I saw that, I saw, okay, I haven't read a novel. I've given up on novels. I haven't read one in like 10 years at least. But then I'm just about like 5 pages away from finishing Sinwar's novel, and it's fantastic. Justin's already done a wonderful review of it and spoken about it, you know, much better than I can. But what stuck out to me about Sinwar's novel is that how respectful he is to all the different factions. You know, in this family story that he tells, he has all the, you know, the PLO, the defenders of the Oslo process, the whole thing. Like he's respectful of all the factions, and he has this long-term vision of the struggle that he lays out in this book. So yeah, I hope that people look it up. It's a banned book apparently, so look it up and read it, because it's a great historical document. You know, it's something that you read as for a living history of the whole conflict spanning decades. So and the other thing that I find, again, you know, we have these examples of how terrified they are of just even little slivers of dissent, you know, because they know their whole story could easily crumble. You know, like, why we're worried about how long are we gonna be able to talk to each other on YouTube, you know, and you know, we have Asa Winstanley, the police coming to his house and seizing his devices, and, you know, not arresting him, but seizing all the stuff he does for his journalism. So I take comfort in that. I take encouragement in that. It's like, look how terrified they are of just us with our small platforms, our tiny platform. But you know, when you're saying something that's true, it's very powerful. So I have to hold on to that. So I that's what keeps me kind of plugging away, you know. And I think, yeah, there has to be denial, but there also has to be cowardice. There has to be people who just won't accept that, you know, the October 7th was an act that we should celebrate. They overran at least eight, according to UN report on the October 7th. And UN is super cowardly. They bend over backwards to please Israel, and still they acknowledge, right, in one of their reports that on October 7th the Palestinian fighters overran at least 8 military bases. I mean, how can you take an attack like that and try to depict it as some kind of terrorism? That was about as targeted an attack against a genocidal occupier as you could possibly do. So yeah, so I take comfort from how scared they are of even small voices and people with small platforms, just pushing back and not accepting these limits that they try to impose on you.
You know, I've watched the video of Sinwar throwing the stick a lot of times. I'm sure you guys have all watched it a lot of times, and I realized, I think he probably thought the drone was going to come in the other window, because I actually think he planned that shot to mimic the scene from 2021 when he was on the couch, because he was sitting like this, and then he was like, you could see, like, for me, I don't know, I'm reading into it, but I could see this kind of like irritation, like, shit, the drone came in the other window. It's ruined the whole shot, and he had to lean over and turn around. But like, there were windows everywhere in that room, right? So
I've never thought of that, but that's quite possible. Yeah,
I think they screwed up his, you know.
Justin, do you remember that when they got the Tamil Tiger, the guy
Prabhakaran?
and his whole family? Yeah, and the whole family too. Like, they executed the whole family.
Yeah,
they surrounded them.
There's video of the kid, his oldest kid, like full of bullet holes. There's a photo of him full of bullet holes where the Tamil army presented it as, like, you know, heat of battle. But then there's video from earlier where he was in their custody. So it's very clear that they like had this kid and then they killed him after.
I was thinking about that scene, and I've been thinking about, you know, like that scene, like, I mean, Sinwar's martyrdom. I mean, like, I'll admit something, guys. I actually haven't watched the video. When it happened, I was like having like a mild, I don't know, I had like a panic attack when I heard, except I was the most calm one in our chat. I was the most calm one in our chat. Like I knew that it was true the moment I saw the pictures. Like Justin, you were in a bit of denial, and like we were
I
all
was just
kind of
like,
shocked.
things can be faked. Yeah, don't be.
Yeah. And it's a good instinct to have, I believe, that to be like, no, this isn't happening. But like I had dinner plans, and I was like sitting and having dinner, and it was awful, and I was just surrounded by all these people, and I couldn't help but like think, like I was looking at all these, like, of course I'm just projecting, I don't know who these people were, but I was like, oh, look at these normies. They live in their small, like worthless Western world, like, well, like I do, and they will never know the heroism that indigenous people of Gaza know, like in this man. Like they sit here, and I don't know who they were. I'm sorry to the people. I don't mean this, but I'm holding you as a stand-in for the entire Western world. It's that how hollow our existence is here, because we are the baddies, and we like this the land that is that this place, this country that it exists in its framework, our citizenships. We are the baddies. We are the descendants of the worst kind of genociders. So yeah, the reason why the U.S. doesn't care about the genocide in Gaza and why they lie is because they were like the original genociders, or one of them, that like, oh, we've seen this movie before. This is a version of our own history played back to us, highly sped up and miniaturized for our, and so of course we're not going to decry, and in fact we're helping it. This is we're authoring this too, right? Is that the globality of this genocide is something that we're going to have to think about for the rest of our lives. Is that think about the global, like all the flights, the planes required to deliver the means by which this genocide unfolds. Like there is a what's the term that like all those techoids in the 90s used to use, like to describe like an iPhone? Like this is a global, what's it called? Anyway, supply chain.
Supply chain?
Like the global supply chain of Zionist colonization is something that like I don't think we've ever seen on this scale. Certainly never at this rapidity. However, what I wanted to also point out is that, like, to go back to like think about this hollowness, is that the cost of living in our safe, like our safe bubble, right, where our media keeps from us all of the worst violence that we produce, right, that only gives back the violence. Like the only time it shows violence is that it's when it's useful towards creating more violence. So that should make you think about why they are so silent on Gaza. Like these are the worst people on the planet. Like CBC, these people are actual monsters. Like they're talking about this is a genocide is unfolding in Gaza every day. They're looking the other way, and on top of that, they're doing like, oh, Canadian athletes are banding together to petition Saudi Arabia for its human rights abuses. Like an actual story on CBC like a week ago. I mean, it's perverse, but it's not perverse when you realize what we are, what this country is, what its own history is, and why it sees itself in this plucky little genocide state, right? Why it sees a reflection of itself, and why ultimately this whole time all of its concerns for country X, country Y, it was always fake, right? They never care about people. These are the most ruthless, like imperialist goons on the planet, the political classes of our countries. So yeah, like let's be realistic for a second. Of course, like, Matt Miller is going to be like, I'm just an old-fashioned White House speaker. I don't know what y'all talking about. Like, like this is a genocide is as American as apple pie, man. Like, of course they're going to boost it. Of course they're going to help it. Like, this is one of the pinnacle acts of U.S. foreign policy of like the 21st century, like the Gaza genocide, because it's putting all of its weight. I don't know. I didn't really have a point to that.
I think the Matt Miller thing though is particularly galling because he shows you with his facial tics that he knows that that he's full of shit, but he has the power to continue lying to you about it, and he has that diabolical ghoulish smirk that people have pointed out, that like Sam Husseini pointed out in like a press conference, and he got all like upset, right? But to go back quickly to the Sinwar thing, like it's interesting to me watching that last video, the hubris of these different like state genocidal powers, right? Like in Latin American and Mexican history, some of the most consequential revolutionaries ended up as a trophy photograph, right? For the the state forces that ended up killing them. Emiliano Zapata, the guy that I researched, Lucio Cabaña, Che Guevara is like the most famous one. And the idea that posting these trophy videos or photos is somehow going to kill the ideas along with the act, like the man, the individual that they just executed. It's so they never learn. It's the same thing with the Sinwar. Like had the hubris that Israel had in releasing that video, thinking that that video was actually going to what? Make him look cowardly, take away his power, defeat the idea that he represents, that he fought and died for. The one figure who managed to live out and die peacefully in his bed that had a similar impact, I guess, in my view, because he survived something like 600 and some assassination attempts, was Fidel Castro. Like obviously if he had been killed, he would have had like a similar situation as like Che Guevara. But the fact that he died in like an Adidas jumpsuit, peacefully in his bed, having outlived, I don't know how many US presidents, that was like one of the few exceptions. But the idea, it's just this hubris, right? That because of denial, because they have access to institutional media power to shape representation of what's going on in Gaza, they thought, okay, we're going to release this video and this is going to make Sinwar look bad. Like, it's just, that's hubris, right? I don't even think that's stupidity. That's just genocidal hubris. And I don't know, like going back to Sina's point about the globality of it, this week I tweeted again this video of an elderly man in Gaza with doing his soliloquy about how, you know, how he's so, this was like, I think the video was filmed shortly after October 7th. And thinking about how we're watching US empire being remade and refashioned on top of the bodies of Palestinians, like this man who in his little soliloquy says, you know, is Gaza this scary for them? I am so proud to be a part of this land. And on the one hand, so you have US empire being, it's not the bumbling accidental empire that got pulled into this by Israel. No, they're involved in trying to reshape geopolitically West Asia. Like that's the way I read it now. I'm not concerned about whether it's the Israel lobby or whether it's clearly, to me, it's US empire trying to reinstitute or restart, quote unquote, birth pangs of democracy or birth pangs of a new Middle East once again. Like we're back in the early 2000s. But what these imperial powers and their little acolyte regimes continually fail to account for is the determination, the will, the sacrifice, and the courage represented by this elderly man. They don't understand that on a like an individual level, and they don't understand this on a broader intrastate regional level as well, right? Like thinking about how there's a real ethics of solidarity that is driving the actions of Hezbollah or Iran or the Yemenis, Ansar Allah, in doing what they're doing in support of the people, the Palestinians in Gaza. And this is another thing that we saw this throughout the Cold War in the US being constantly surprised by the steadfastness, the resistance, the solidarity at the micro level and at the broader state level between these different groups, between these different states in fighting back against genocide and fighting back against empire. So I think Sina is, I think something that I'll continue to think about is the globality of all the globality. God, Sina, you and your academic jargon, man. But
the entire world
there's something
is waging war on Palestine.
Right. That's what that man says in that video.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting to me. It's at the very micro level that man has a better geopolitical understanding of empire and of what is going on than all these other people who are intellectuals in the West who are fueling and who are helping to fuel that denial that Justin's talking about.
I have one other emotion to talk about, which is like, which leads to my own denial, which was what you were talking about, Sina, when we first got the news, and I was like, no, this could easily be faked and so on. Which is like fear. Like I was really like the way that the Lebanon war unfolded from the pager attack through to, I mean, looking back, I guess it was from Fawad Shukur's assassination through to the assassination of Nasrallah and Hashem Safieddine you know, like this whole line of like just one day, every single day they were getting a senior leader. And it was just like, how is this happening? And they would meet, like it was very clear that one of the biggest assassinations was at a meeting of commanders who were trying to figure out how to respond to the pager attack. And so it was like, did they just get Hezbollah's number? Like, I think that was the phrase that I was using at the time. I was like, they got their number somehow. I don't. And that was like a really terrifying moment. And Hezbollah, you know, it's not a structure. It's a structure that's resilient to assassination, because assassination is a reality for them and has always been a reality for them, and they've had to build their whole structures under assassination. Same with Hamas, same with everybody that fights Israel. But it's like that thing they were trying to do to make us all feel like, what horrible thing are they gonna think of next? It worked. It worked. Like like it's now like deep in the back of my mind to think of that, you know, what they call Jewish cleverness, or whatever, the
Jewish
genocidal
ingenuity.
ingenuity, right?
These were just,
Now
I mean,
and
mind
I
you, these
don't
were just
think
crufty online
yeah,
people.
I
These
don't
were
want
just cranks
to. I
online.
don't even
Yeah,
want to.
it's
That's
stupid.
a sick, vile thing to say on so many levels, and just because it's them saying it, it doesn't make it any less gross. But my, like, the way the Iran thing unfolded, I have that thought. I'm like, are they trying to lull Iran into this sense of security and then do something even more horrible? Are they trying to show weakness when they're strong? Anyway, it's just that kind of terrorism really does kind of scramble you, and I still feel a little scrambled. And I remember Ali Jazini was talking about the Iran attack, and he said something yesterday. I read one of his tweets on my sit rep yesterday night, and he said something like, Hezbollah has recovered. I wouldn't say they're healthy. That'll take years, but they're functioning, or something. And I was just like, yeah. Anyway, that was, it's definitely been like a theme for me this month.
Yeah, what I liked about what Sinwar's novel was, he captured this sense that you know, the terrorism against the Palestinians, it comes in ebbs, it gets intense, then it recedes, it gets intense, but the Palestinians are always learning, always developing. You know, he describes they developed a very simple, early on, decades ago, simple little weapon. The main character develops it. It's a four-legged spike, so that no matter how you throw it, he welded it up out of little wires. You throw it, no matter how you throw it, it'll always land with one pin sticking up, so that you can throw it anywhere and disable vehicles. So they start with that, and then towards the end of the novel, they're developing rockets. They're starting to at the early stages of the rocket program. So they're always developing. So, you know, you talk about ingenuity, cleverness, but it's also about, you know, stamina and resilience. And you know, there's a scene I really liked where they're working on building a house because their family is growing. Sinwar's families are, you know, the characters are obviously standing for Sinwar's experience. His family's growing, so they're building extra floors on the house, and they're saying, "Oh, we're tilting the roof the wrong way. It's gonna drive our neighbors crazy." And I said, "Okay, we got to redo it. We got to tilt it the other way so the water flows down to the road and not on the neighbor's house." It was just nice that captures that the families are growing, the knowledge is being acquired, they're constantly developed, so that if the fact that they exist is something that Israel cannot, ultimately is not going to be able to cope with. So now they've taken this opportunity to try to say, okay, well, maybe they don't have to exist, you know. But I honestly, I don't think in my view, despite the horrors they're going to inflict, I don't think they can succeed. And reading his novel, I think, reinforces that to me, that the long-term trends are on their side. It's just but there's terrific possibilities, obviously, including even potentially even global annihilation, you know, depending how this plays out. But I think that you know, we have to focus on again the heroism and the resiliency and the ingenuity of the people who are resisting, because that they're doing it under the most incredible adverse situations, and they've done it, and they continue to do it. Just that's what you get from his novel. I think it's what he's trying to convey is, look, this is where we began, and this is where we are. And he's trying to convey that. And it's in you read something like this, and you don't read. This is the guy they're telling us is a terrorist. The guy who wrote this novel that's giving this broad sweep. This is the guy they're telling you is just a killer and a criminal and everything else. And even in the novel, there's a critique of how they go after collaborators, where he acknowledges that we have to have systems that we can't just have young people identifying somebody they accuse of being a collaborator and killing them. They could be wrong. They could just be, they could be acting indiscriminately or unjustly. But he says then he's making the argument in the novel that, well, but it's very hard to have proper systems in place when you're under occupation and you're getting assassinated. So he's going back. It's just, I really hope people read the novel, because it's it just dispels so much. And I think obviously, why did they ban it? Well, that's why.
I wonder, I guess it's, for me, sometimes I think about the scale of all of this, like there's a temp, where we are watching the incredible violence that is being done, that is like being perpetuated by multiple countries in this planet, right? Like collectively to Palestinians, and we're watching it live, right? Like almost as it's happening. Which is itself like historical, like just to think of what this means. And later on, how do we even come up with archives to store these videos? Like, there's going to be a need to like institute all kinds of digital archives, but also like study centers, so that people have this. Like, Zionists have preserved their own genocide in archives and journalistically preserved it for the rest of like human history to study. So there's something to be considered on that. But bigger than that is that, like, as hard as it is to think about, like, wow, these, they call them decapitation attacks, right? Which is like a Western slang, of course. Zionists, that's like all they have. Like, they talk like they're masters, but they call these like these decapitation strategy, right? And it's because ultimately, it, like, the metaphor says that, oh, Nasrallah is the head of Hezbollah, right? Like, the Hezbollah is a political corpus, it's a body, and that guy over there, that guy with the turban who like yells at us and humiliates us, we're gonna bomb him with all the force we have, right? And like, this is how, like, and therefore they'll have no head, right? Therefore they can't think. Like, they're that stupid to think that this organization of like hundreds of thousands, when you include the broader sort of like the sort of extra militia force, right? Because it's an activist, there's a social worker side, there's a political side, there's kind of NGOs. Like, this is what Western libs call a movement, right? Like, whether you like it or not, it's a movement. And like, it's just a movement you don't like recognize as valid. And because 1,000 years of Orientalist history have programmed you to like be afraid of an armed Muslim man. So when Zionists kill like Nasrallah, is that they think, oh, we got the head, right? They can't think without us. Now, do I know the inner workings of Hezbollah at all? Do I know how its Shura Council and what role Nasrallah played in that? What role did he have ultimately over like strategic whatever? I don't know. Like, that's not, but like, if you really think an organization that big is reliant upon one man's brain, right? Like, if you think that one brain, one human life is able to coordinate something that big, like, you're just a dum-dum. Right? Like, you don't know how movements work. You don't know how history unfolds. And to think of the scale of the task that Palestinians and Lebanese and Yemenis and Iranians Syrians are facing right now, in terms of what's the word? Dismooring, unmooring, dismounting. I don't know, tearing out this deeply embedded force of European imperialism that is the combined power of multiple European empires, right? That's its origin, right? Zionism is the megazord of European and America, and the same way America is to a point, which is why they're so closely linked, right? And like, Britain is like the midwife, so to speak, but ultimately, like, this is a European imperialist project. This is, I think, the most audacious European imperialist project that they tried and to do this insane cannonball run of settler colonialism over this land of millions of people and tried to do it overnight, right? Like it's an incredibly impossible task that they set for themselves, that they failed, and its ongoing failure is what we're watching, and it's reaching a crisis point. And somebody tweeted this. I gotta find this tweet. It was one of these Brosant accounts. I don't like him at all. It's like Analyticus Camillus or something. And it was right after October 7th. And it was right to the warning of, this was a trap. The Palestinian resistance. He didn't say it's this eloquently, obviously, or whatever. It was more like this is a trap, basically, to get Israel into this essentially quagmire. And he wrote that a year ago. I have to find the tweet. I'll find it. But the more you think about this, is that the scale of this and the fact that they are expanding the genocide tells you that it's not working, and they have to expand their plans and invest more and more of themselves. And yeah, it's ugly, and it's not gonna die by a knockout blow. This is this is death by 1,000 cuts. You can't kill an empire by decapitating it. There's no, although mind you, there almost was a decapitation attack. They got Benjamin Netanyahu's bedroom. We should probably talk about that. That was a historic day, and our media has played it down. But this is one of the most defended sites on the planet. And one Hezbollah, pretty low tier in terms of their arsenal, got through and went after and got his bedroom, right? And so this is not we're at a crazy inflection point in all this. I mean, there's I've heard rumors in some of my chats that there's talks of this war coming to an end, that it's reaching that point.
No,
I don't think
that's
so.
deception. That's deception.
I don't think so. Yeah, that's
a
deception.
Trick. That's another
no,
one of those
it's
tricks.
just getting started for the Israelis, at least. They're starting to feel this. They're not godlike. As much as they want to think they have godlike colonial power over this, because they're not Americans. They're not your Brits sitting in the metropole waging a colonial fight off the hinterland. They're in the colonial center metropole, so to speak. That's what Israel is that it's a piece of the West deeply embedded into this foreign region that it's been trying to pretend that it's the memes of those cell phone towers that they dress up as pine trees. It's day 75. They have no idea what I'm doing. That's the Israel project of trying to blend in this fake state, which is basically a couple of cities and a military, which is a military base dressed up with a couple of cities and a whole lot of hype around it. This is coming to a head.
Yeah, I mean, this the frontier. See, I was thinking the video you guys saw of the drone when it was hiding behind the helicopter, that Israeli helicopter was trying to find the drone that actually hit Netanyahu's bedroom, which was pretty funny. Sina, it's not even just a movement
bubbles coming out of them.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Do you have the address to Netanyahu's house? And then the speech bubble comes out of the helicopter.
Sina, it's not even a movement. It's, to use another lib terminology, it's civil society. I mean, so Western countries are allowed to have civil societies in a separation between quote unquote civil society and state powers. But because of Orientalism, because of hundreds of years of colonialism, we look at these countries and we see some version of authoritarian, totalitarian regime with one person at the head pulling all the strings, and they're controlling every single thing that's happening on the ground. It's kind of interesting. I've been thinking about that interesting movie from the late 90s, Starship Troopers. And at the end, when the humans finally do a breakthrough against the bugs that they're going to war against, how do they have how do they manage that military breakthrough? They captured the one big bug that was supposedly just emitting orders and strategy. I mean, I think that movie is really smart. It's supposed to be a satire, right? But I think it's smart, and it's pretty accurate in kind of capturing that Western settler colonial mentality when it comes to war and counterinsurgency. And at the end, that's what happens in the movie, right? They capture the one, and it's gendered too, right? It's a female big bug that had been responsible for just emitting orders the whole time. But obviously, we've seen that it's radically different on the ground.
Yeah. The mothership trope.
And and the thing is too, like I remember in CLR James when he wrote about the Haitian Revolution. I mean, I'm sure Alex, you're more up to speed on having delved into material more recently. But I remember CLR James talked about how Toussaint Louverture was a wonderful leader and a very smart, brilliant guy, but he faltered. He faltered at the end, and it was up to the let's say the movement, the lower level movement people who got the revolution back on track, who ended up taking it all the way home and finally getting rid of the French. Because it's like like when Sinwar relates in his novel, the leaders faltered with Oslo. The big guys actually they fucked up, and then it was up to the rest of the society, like our civil society, whatever you call it, to kind of right the course and keep the resistance going. So yeah, it's the opposite of the big leaders. The big leaders are fallible, just like everybody. And when they screw up, a lot of times it's their followers, their so-called followers, who actually right the course.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is the tweet.
This was the tweet. Yeah.
Sent me. Yeah. Well, this will probably fall on deaf ears, but it's too important not to point out. Whatever Netanyahu chooses to do, ordering the IDF to conduct a land operation will wind up being a cataclysmic mistake, or more accurately, a forced error. The Israeli government isn't just dealing with last decade's Hamas here. This raid was carefully tailored to elicit the responses the IDF is carrying out right now. So, didn't fall on deaf ears. 373,000 views. But...
it's something this October 7th is much bigger than the atrocity debate that's like left to us. Like, it's so much bigger. And I mean, the very name itself, like, it's a flood. This is a flood. You don't die right away from a flood. The water gets higher and higher and higher, and you think, like, you don't realize it, and you think, okay, no, it's gonna recede, it's gonna recede, it's gonna recede. And then, like, suddenly you realize, like, oh, it's in your basement. Like, oh, it's like, it's getting to your, like, pump room. It's, it's like, this is the Israelis have done something so incredibly hateful and destructive, not just to not just to Palestinian human beings and their society, and Lebanese and Yemenis and the whole region, but like they're tearing at the fabric of their own society. And like, we know the stats, we know about like the people are leaving, and I guess like I'm sure this was the calculation on the part of the resistance, get them like into like this regularly scheduled quagmire, and they have to resort to these spectacular acts of violence to have some kind of image to themselves and to their own people that, oh yeah, we're the powerful one, we're the colonial ones, we set the pace. This is a remarkable time we're in.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, Iran's gonna hit them again, I think. Like, I don't see it. Everything Iran has said since yesterday has been like, they said we're entitled and obliged to respond. So yeah,
and there's linkage.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, look, to be fair, I mean, there was a lot of IRGC guys killed in Syria, and there was never a response.
But you're making an argument that made sense in April. That, like, you know what I mean?
Yes, and
like
now
April,
it's different. It's true.
Yeah,
Strategic patience is no longer the story here. And that might have been part of the plan, is that you slowly escalate and you, I don't know, because sometimes I think too is that, like, when people were really like about Hania, after Hania, like, well, how come they don't respond? How come you don't respond? Is that then you're in effect letting the enemy dictate your strategy and your timing. Right, is that you're hoping that because that's the whole point of these slap across the face attacks, right? It's to humiliate them. Is that tactically they don't hurt, right? Is that these Ismail Hania was a senior figure, yes, an important key figure, but new ones grow. But ultimately, the reality for Israel did not change after the assassination. The same way it didn't change, and if anything, they've lost a lot more guys now that they're trying in Lebanon. I mean, like the pager attack and Nasrallah's killing, like these were a prelude to a larger attack that's supposed to be going better. Now, I guess the debate is, are they actually trying? Sometimes I'm like, are they pretend trying and like throwing dudes into
don't
a
believe
like
it.
a slaughter factory?
No.
Because like they clearly
That's
don't,
not
but
how
they
it
don't put
works.
enough, but they don't put enough guys. Like they don't
No,
put
but
enough
more
guys.
guys. My conclusion of that is more guys. If it's the same proportion, then if they send a big, I mean, I think they can do it. I've said it many times. I think they can do it with the resources they have there, but they will take thousands of casualties, and they'll take them over thousands of casualties for several days in a row, and it'll be like 1, 2, 3,000 men killed in a day, and then the next day, and then the next day,
which
and
they
then they'll
can't
have
sustain.
I don't know. Maybe they can, but like that's how it's gonna be, and then they'll be in charge of some huge area. Congratulations, we've broken through, and we now occupy this area with 100,000 men, and that's when the real fun begins, right? Because that's when Hezbollah is really in a guerrilla war posture, and they'll be popping up out of everywhere, and it's a weird.
But then
They
there's
put
also the
themselves in a
question.
weird.
But then there's also Hezbollah isn't just a guerrilla. Is not just like a
yeah.
guerrilla army, right? Like, because they can reach into every city in Israel
Yeah.
now,
And that
so
wouldn't
like
stop.
that's
Yeah.
so they're also exactly, which are things that Israel cannot sustain. Like they can't, like as much like being a Western power that they are, they can't live without electricity for more than a week. They'll
Yeah.
lose their minds and start murdering each other, and people murdering each other here for toilet paper during COVID. What will a real crisis, social crisis, affect their society, especially when a ton of them have other lives, comfortable lives in country in actual metropoles, not the pretend metropole they think they're living in.
But
Yeah,
I think the crazy dynamic too is like there's also other fronts, right? So you have the U.S. role in Lebanon, and what they're trying to do is achieve some sort of regime change. Like so you have
Except
the
Hezbollah is
IDF.
not the regime, so you can regime change all day.
But it's part of like that old colonialist like divide and conquer thing, right? We saw I mean, in Gaza over the course of a year, especially early on, we saw this, right? We've seen this script where Israel tried to peel off some of the clans, or they tried to in Gaza they tried to sneak in the Fatah guy who didn't last very long. I think they're trying to do something similar on a larger, grander scale with Lebanon. They have their they have their cannon fodder in the north, while the U.S. is trying to push through regime change. While this bombing apparently is designed to do genocidal population of the civilian population of Lebanon, but also trying to stoke some sort of sectarian, restoke sectarian divisions
by selectively bombing the Shia. Yeah.
So you have these, I think it's a multi-pronged strategy that operates at a different pace, but meanwhile you have these small units of IDF guys just getting red triangled for weeks now.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
But the regime, I mean, the crazy thing about the regime change is like Hezbollah exists because Lebanon is an incapable state. It's incapable of defending itself against the political intrigues of the US and the military intrigues of Israel. And so Hezbollah,
which was by design, by the way, which was the purpose of the Civil War. Yeah.
And once upon a time, in this context, Hezbollah arose to defend the country from Israel, and like you can't regime change them. They were designed because you regime changed Lebanon. So like you can't regime change your way out of a thing that your regime change created.
It's interesting.
Autoimmune response.
It's like Lebanon's also foundational for U.S. Middle East policy, right? Like it's from the late 50s, right? So it's also, you can see why there's what Amos Hochstein is doing his bullshit.
Good luck.
Trying to
him.
stoke some of this stuff. The other thing I keep thinking about, guys, is like in 1973, there was an oil embargo. Like what? Like where are the other like the I love Justin when you send us the answer a lot.
Bro, there was Egypt 1973.
Right, like Where?
Yeah, like yeah.
Where?
It
just a
doesn't matter.
shame.
It's
But
that's
this is
ancient history,
yeah.
man. It's
Let
ancient
me say
history.
one. Let me say
No, I know
one.
it's ancient history, but like you
At
can
the end
just
of the day,
I
they
think
didn't
I
accomplish
keep thinking
anything
about it.
with
No,
these.
that's not true,
With I mean,
Sina.
I don't
No,
know.
no,
Yeah.
no.
You're
Oh,
bitter.
No,
You're
that is
bitter.
not
You're
true.
you're
That
right.
is not
You're
true.
rightly bitter. You're right to be bitter, but it's
Yes,
not. It's
yes.
not correct to say they
Not
didn't
true.
accomplish it. But let me say one. Let me say one more emotion, because I get this. I don't know if you guys get this. You probably do where you are, but there's like a certain fear that we all have that like our time on YouTube is probably coming to an end. and and our time on Twitter
We
is
can't be friends after that. You know that, right? We can't talk to each other. I'm blocking all of you.
our days. How will you block us? Your account will be nuked. Your account will be gone. Our day, our days of having these devices may well be numbered, and so on. But like, I get this feeling from people who are not doing anything. Or, even in my life, there are people who are doing a little bit for Israel, doing their little part in their institution. And I get the sense that when they talk to me, they're just a little bit ashamed. They're a little bit ashamed of themselves. And like it comes out in all kinds of ways, like it must be nice to be like that kind of vibe, like, oh, it must be nice to be a Palestine guy, like, and have a clear conscience and whatever, right? But like even when it's not passive aggressive, there's just a little bit of like shame. And like I do get the sense that like Western society, there's probably a lot of people who are ashamed of themselves, and I don't know what that's going to do. I don't know what effect that's going to have long term or medium term.
Well, I'm a strong believer in spread the shame, intensify the shame, rub the shame in
I
their
don't
face.
I don't know how
I don't think
relevant the
so.
West is going to be in the future. I think we're we haven't talked about BRICS, we haven't talked about Kazan. We're like there's a whole world being built. This is the true crime of our media class, right? Is that that our ruling elite has decided that it will hear like Justin, it will smash, it will accept
Yes.
praise only,
Yes,
and
praise
it
only.
will not. And so as a result, you don't hear about these important historic changes that are happening in the world because it's bad news for us, right? Because it contravenes certain red lines, narratively wise, whatever, for how we imagine the world. So yeah, Russia and China, the big bad countries, guess what? A ton of countries around the world don't think that. And they're in fact saying, let's go with you guys. Like this is debilitating for the West. And this genocide, like these are not like this is a failing West, and this genocide is like is one of the consequences in some ways of a West that doesn't know what to do as it watches itself circle the drain, and its precious little ethno-state at the heart of like its petrodollar zone is flailing badly as well. And so the media class just ignores all of this. It's just our filler, our stupid culture war. It's our idiotic celebs, the stupid election cycle. God, every 4 years we have to hear about the stupid American election cycle. It doesn't even matter. Like, who cares? Everything and the recriminations, and then someone loses, and then they get all bitter, and it's like the big stupid fucking like the world does not give a shit about America as much as like we do and are trapped in their media bubble. And it's like, and its own relevance to the world is rapidly fading. So I mean, this is gonna get uglier from here because like you can't just like print dollars to fix your problems the way you can before. And you're not just gonna like pump more oil, like which is Canada's solution to everything. In this case, they're like,
And
it's just
cancel
not
immigration.
yeah, and now shut the door to their cheap labor pool.
Kick the
That's
ladder.
gonna work. I think Sina's more optimistic about the BRICS thing, but we can
Same.
talk about that for another
I
time.
can't. Yeah, I'm
They're
a
gonna
bit
have
of a
the
brick.
same
Oh, I'm
issues
very-
that the Bandung and non-alignment movement had. I
No,
think that we
not
should
at
talk
all.
about that we
No.
should talk about at some point. But we need a lot of shame because institutionally, at least within the United States, the institutions have their fangs out, and they're
Yeah.
at Rutgers University they used they brought out bulldozers to destroy Jewish sukkah uh, like things that they had constructed. So they brought
Nobody hates Jews like Zionists.
It's
It's
like-
so crazy.
I just saw,
They
you know, we
hate
have
Jews so
a
much.
professor. I know a professor at the University of Southern California who's been told by the university that his tweets make Jewish students on campus uncomfortable. Like these institutions have their fangs out, and because I think they're losing this battle. So we need lots of shame. We need lots of Joe flamethrower gifts
We need Joe.
to distribute socially against all these feckless, cowardly institutions.
Yeah, I think
All right, guys. Yeah.
that's huge. That's huge. The fake opposition that never goes to where it needs to go. That never supports never supports the Palestinian resistance. You know, that's huge to me. Yeah. Go ahead.
Guys,
Sorry.
send help to the U.S. Send help to the U.S. Please. We need hashtag SOS USA.
Yeah.
Help us during this election, please.
I would say, you know, you're welcome to come to Canada, but obviously I can't say that in Canada.
Hell no, I'm
is
going
not
south,
welcoming
man. I'm
anybody.
going south.
Yeah, you go south. Go south. Go east. Okay, guys. Anything else? Anyone else want to wrap it up?
Thanks, guys. This was good. Sorry I talked a lot.
Don't be sorry.
No way. Thanks, guys. No way, Sina.
Thanks, guys.